You got to tread lightly sometimes, for sure. So,
We're having fun with it.
yeah, it's good. It's really good. So, again, it's great to meet you. I want to begin our conversation with
Okay.
something that I think we're all getting a little bit fatigued by, but I think it's essential to bring up, which is COVID, the pandemic, surviving that time period. How did you get through it, and how did it alter or change the way that you do work now?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. And I do think I think we'll be even the people that maybe so my son, I had a 6-month-old son at the time, and then my jazz musician son was in kindergarten at the time. And then we had kids going all the way up. So my daughter was in fifth grade. I think people are going to remember it differently, right? I'll remember it as an adult, but I think the effects from COVID, whether we recognize it or not, are going to be there for a generation, right? Or more.
Yeah.
Because it was such a change in the way that we lived. So I continued to work, and it was extremely stressful. I think it was one of the more stressful periods of time in my life. I was working at a special operations unit, and there was still a need. I mean, the world in our world anyway was not going to slow down much. I mean, there's
Yeah.
still things to do abroad. And so part of my job there was assessment and selection. We had to continue to hire, high performers in a way that was effective. And we really had to change things. So luckily I worked with a lot of people who challenge is not new to them, and it's almost exciting. So it's like, well, how do we solve this problem together where we can interview and kind of can test and get to know people in an intimate enough way to trust the data that comes out of that process that's now all virtual. Still trust them to come to this unit where we're going to put things on their plate that are very different than possibly where they're coming from. So at the same time, however, like I just previously mentioned, I was a mom of a newborn. I was nursing. I had a kindergartner, a fifth grader, and we had a daughter in high school, all now trying to shift to virtual classrooms. So they were all at home. My son in kindergarten, I mean, how do you get a kindergarten to stay on a screen and actually learn something? Like, he was hiding from it. It was the most miserable experience, and I felt it was totally unnatural.
Yeah.
So I wasn't necessarily like stressed. I was just to like make him stay on a screen because I didn't think that was probably the best way for him to learn. But trying to teach him, right, became part of my job. And I think a lot of parents who continue to work, they were now teachers, homemakers, and employees all at the same time. And like my kids are used to the normal routine, like they have constant access to you when you're at home. And in this case, we're trying to say, oh, now behind this door is where work happens. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't clean. It was super messy, and I think a lot of people were going through the same thing. So what we tried to do, and I tried to use my background as a psychologist to bring some peace and calm to my own household. And I think that that's where I had to start, you know what I mean? For my own mental and physical health, and for the mental and physical health of my family. And so an important thing to do when you are in the midst of a situation that feels completely chaotic and out of your control is to try to implement some structure and control in the places that you can.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's as simple as having a routine or routine times about when you eat and when you sleep.
Yeah.
And so you start there, and then you can kind of jump off from there. And then I think gratitude is always going to be an important piece. So no matter what's going on, where can you find the silver lining? Like, where can you find the things to be grateful for? And that's a complete mindset shift. When you read about, and I hope people do, or maybe even from this conversation, feel the desire to go back in time, go back in history. You can read fiction if you want, and a lot of people enjoy fiction, but there's so many incredible stories from, let's say, for instance, the Holocaust or military POWs, where they are essentially, living a life that has to be similar to hell, right? And yet they are still out of that hopelessness. They're able to cultivate hope. They're able to do things like set routines,
Yep.
and take control over the controllables, even in environments like that. So that's where I started.
Yeah.
That was such a long answer.
No, it's great, and it opened up a lot of memories for me. I'm an IT technician for a large school district, and I remember at one point one of the teachers said these kindergartners only know masks, and it blew my mind. I was like, that's it. Like for all of us that have been around for a while, we had a different reality. We had a whole different world. None of this pandemic and scare stuff. It wasn't even in movies. And then once we started getting into the 90s and the knots, all of these weird movies of pandemics and all these things. And then all of a sudden it's right here. And these kids have no mileage on their odometer to process all of it. We do. So, like you said, this is going to be many generations because even them being away from school, that social emotional attachment that they had, that was huge for them. And they didn't have it for a year or two or even longer, depending on where you lived. So it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It takes me to, so I was in Western North Carolina a few weeks ago following Hurricane Helene,
yeah,
and similar situation, right? Like there's a lot of unknowns, a lot. Um, and it's too much for the human brain to think about the future 10 years from now when you're not really sure where your next meal is going to come from, or if you're going to have a warm enough place to sleep as the winter comes on, or how your children are going to learn if their school isn't open. Or and so it was, again, it was starting over, like, okay, let's set routine times for when we eat, for when we sleep, let's connect with one another. And one of those things, though, as communities face chaotic situations, is for the children, right? Like, how can we, the routine and controllables are going to be good for every single human being. But in that case in particular, just because it's a recent example, it's like, how can we get these kids back to school, like a physical place where they're around other children, they're doing normal things like learning, like playing outside, like pretending, having to wake up at the same time, having to go to bed at the same time, eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the same time. Because just that structure, even if it's kind of, for us as adults, it seems like we're creating it and it's not yet real, it is helpful.
yeah. So let's get to speaking of kids, let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis for your career. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day. One of the kids is curious and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
Yeah, that's that's such a good question, because sometimes my kids still ask me, like they're a little bit confused about what I do, and I think it's just because it's a departure from traditional psychology. So I always help with, what I do is help people the best I can. And that seems to make sense for them. And so, like, when I go away to places like North Carolina, or I was, gone again this last weekend, I say, hey, like, I was away helping people. And then as they grow older, we can have more conversations
Yeah,
about that. And what does a psychologist do? A psychologist studies how humans behave and why they behave the way that they do. So that's how I would explain it, to third graders. And I think just every human being is curious about even maybe their own thoughts or emotions or behaviors or
yeah,
beliefs. So that might get you into some more interesting questions.
sure. So, what did you want to be when you were in the third grade? What was your dream?
I wanted to be a dancer doctor,
Okay.
because those exist. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
they can. They certainly can.
I,
So,
I, I dance at home.
yeah, for sure. So, take me back to your childhood. How did these seeds get into you to get into psychology and the business of helping people? How did that become your focal point in your career?
Okay, I'm gonna do nutshell. So I was raised by a single mom. My parents got divorced when I was in kindergarten, and so that's kind of all I remember is them not, being together. And then um, went through some chaos, like financially, as a family. And so by the time I was a sophomore or junior in high school, we didn't have a home. And, my mom and I were sharing a bed at my grandparents' house. And I just look back on that with like such awe, really, because my mom and I really didn't fight, like she's my best friend because we had more important things. So it's like that teenage rebellion stuff. I just skipped it because it was like, so it seems so childish, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really thankful for all those experiences. And then had a strong family bond, with my grandparents. And I think that really shaped me. I saw that they traveled the world, and my grandpa had some military experience. But what he did really is show, I think, my whole family what service really looked like. He never cared about acknowledgement from anyone, but he basically, I mean, almost went broke. He made a lot of money in the oil industry in Oklahoma, long time ago,
Yeah.
and he was he was just bent on helping and changing the world as much as he possibly could, especially for the people who other people maybe weren't okay with helping,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So those early influences just showed me, I think, what character looked like,
Yeah.
and then my own path. I mean, I graduated from high school, knew I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be a physician, and then chemistry kind of changed that for me. My why was not big enough to conquer that college chemistry, and I just became fascinated with, my undergrad is in English literature, actually. So just studying people and their brains, and their thoughts and beliefs, but mostly those people were not alive anymore. And so I thought, hey, like, wouldn't it be cool to study people who are still living, maybe that I could talk to?
Yeah.
And yeah, so that kind of one thing led to another with that, and I ended up getting my master's degree and thought I would never go beyond that because that was kind of odd. I thought, like, just in the social kind of circle that I had grown up in, advanced degrees for females. And but I had a few professors that were like, "Hey, where are you going next?" And I mean, literally laughed in their face, like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "Well, where are you going to get your doctorate?" And so they planted those seeds, and I have a lot of people to thank for just giving me great examples of great human beings, faith, believing in more, and then just doing the work to get there. And then once I completed my doctorate, I joined the army, and that is really where the path, like traditional path of psychology, kind of diverged for me, and became interested in the operational piece where you get to learn, all kinds of other things outside of a clinic.
It's interesting when you mention chemistry, how much I hear chemistry can change people's lives and alter paths. And for me, for
Yeah.
some reason, I didn't have to take chemistry in high school or college. But
Mhm.
when I had kids, I got a pool and all my karma came back to me.
Oh my gosh, right? Yes, we've been
Like
there.
no escape. Like absolutely. All right, dude. You got out of it all these years, but here you go because that has been one of the more hexing. It's good now because I've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
So you may have already answered this, but I want to know who's been that hero for you, that stalwart person in your life that's helped you become who you are and achieve what you've achieved.
Oh, um, I would like to give credit to so many people because it is a lot, but for sure, if it's one person, it's my mom.
Yeah.
And that is just because she always, I mean, you've heard some of the chaos that's been in our lives, but even amongst or in the midst of those trying times, she was known for her joy, for her sense of humor, so that was perplexing to me and encouraging. And she would always, you know, tell me over and over, like, that she believed I can do anything. And then somehow, if you hear it enough, then you start to believe it.
Sure.
And every time I'm starting something new, if I feel unsure, you know, um, and maybe sometimes I don't want to believe her because she's always encouraging. You know how that is too.
Yeah. Sure.
Like, okay, sometimes I write her off because she believes I can do anything, but man, you got to have somebody like that in your corner because it's mostly true.
Yeah. So you have to deal with a lot of heavy stuff with people and help them out. Obviously being in hurricane areas, veterans, and all of these other situations. What is it that gets you up out of bed every day to do this work? Not only to help people, but you're a human, you have to evolve too. How do you collectively do that? And what's the gas in your tank every day to get that done?
Ooh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that it was really important for me several years ago to put some labels and names on the things that I value most, that do give me life, that give me joy, that give me energy every day. So that on those lots of days where I'm feeling uncertain about things or things feel a little shaky beneath me, I can look at these few words and be instantly reminded of why I do what I do. And some of those things, faith is going to be at the top of the list. And just like I know 100% with 100% certainty, like the strength that I have to talk with someone who's thinking about taking their own life, or to go to places that have seen devastation. Like that strength is not just coming from within me. Like I'm definitely connected to a creator. So faith is something that carries me through every single day, even like the small challenges. It definitely helps with. And I think just changing my mindset about what is adventure, what is challenge, and always keeping in mind like how short our days are. I think that's been really important.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into a much younger version of you before you
Yeah.
genuinely got on this path, say 18 years old. You can give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've accumulated. What advice would you give that young version of you?
Yeah, I think that that like your story is always being written. And when you look at like the hero's journey, for example, sometimes it's like the beast of the belly of the beast is where you're going to learn the greatest lessons that change you the most. And so look forward to, and gosh, like it kind of sounds sick, but even as a young person, like when things started to feel like too normal or too monotonous, sometimes I would say prayers, and just in anticipation of like difficulties to come, or like, hey, maybe like this means I'm ready for an additional challenge, Lord. So like I don't know what that might be, but let's do it, because those challenges are really like there's nothing better to help you grow, to help you learn, to keep you finely attuned to the most important things in life. So I would just say that, yeah, like um, I'm
Yeah.
lost for words, but that's basically my message to my younger self.
So what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Don't know. I've listened to podcasts where people have like these wonderful sayings, and it's
Right.
like that's the one thing that changed it for me. And I don't know that I've ever been given like one piece of advice that has forever like changed the course of my life or changed the way that I think or believe or behave. And I want to give you something really super specific. I
Sure.
just I just don't have like one greatest
That's
piece of advice.
no,
I'm so sorry.
but these are good answers too, because there's such an accumulation of advice and things that we learn from good, we learn from bad. There's all these things that are measuring sticks in our walk,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
genuinely a journey. So this might be a little bit easier. Of everything that you've accomplished beyond your children and your family, what are you ultimately the proudest of that you've accomplished in your life?
So, building trust with people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime someone reaches out to me and and allows me in to something they've been holding by themselves,
Yeah.
that's everything.
Yeah.
Just that they would trust me with that is such an honor, you know.
Yeah. So everyone out there has a perception of you. You have all these pockets of people in your life, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, that's a great question. I don't really think about myself as like I don't know, like in themes. I would just say that I um I have some roles in life that I'm really grateful for, that I want to make the most of, and that I'm always mindful of. And I don't think take anything for granted. Um, my birthday is on Thanksgiving this year, and it happens like every few years, but it's
Yeah.
just so perfect because even like I just would say that like if there's a banner over my life, it probably is thankful.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that just any opportunity, then it makes it exciting. So I lean towards adventure. I lean towards challenge, because I always have hope.
Yeah. So it's probably hard not to be bespeckled by American history being that close to DC. So my question to you is this: if we get off this call, you can get into a time machine and go back in the history of this country. Where would you go in DC? What would you like to have seen with your own eyes?
Definitely like World War II, or pre-World War II during, Holocaust times. I've part of my training is SEER psychology, so survive, evade, resist, escape, and it's basically the study of individuals, mental, physical, spiritual behavior under extreme stress, depravity, isolation. And a lot of those stories, examples that we have, and I even brought them up earlier, is just like love reading real stories from that period of time, and the just the courage that people had. And I think their understanding of human behavior, because there were so many things going on, it was just like a really complex time in history where you want to hold on to, say, if you're, you know, um, you know, of the any kind of faith, like you want to hold on to that, but it's also so terrifying because that could literally be, the death of you. And there's just some incredible stories, I think, that keep me taking that very next step here in this life today in 2024, just based on the behavior that I've seen modeled from stories coming out of that period of time.
So if anyone wants to reach out, learn more about you, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
The best place to find me is on LinkedIn. Yeah,
Okay.
just look me up, Barbara Thompson on LinkedIn. People, I love it when people reach out, just kind of, individual basis, and I'll post different links and things there. So
Okay. Excellent. Barbara, thank you. I appreciate your story. I appreciate your time. Best of luck with everything.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.